Hey everyone, Xyronic here. Welcome to Team Liquid's Boss Strategy Guide powered by Alienware. Be sure to check out tl.gg/alienware to see what the guild uses to raid. Today we'll be going over the Lightblinded Vanguard fight on Mythic difficulty, the penultimate boss in the Voidspire raid. This is probably the first fight in the raid that poses a pretty decent threat to most raid guilds, has a lot of damage input, and for that reason you're going to want to 5 heal this fight instead of the 4 heal that you've seen on every other fight in this raid to this point. There's also a pretty decent amount of prep you can put into this boss beforehand, and with the right amount of prep you can probably keep the pull count to this boss in the 20 to 30 range. I would also recommend copying a setup similar to what our guild did. Here's a look at kind of the prep that we did for this fight in terms of our grouping. So for the healing absorbs, which is one of the ultimates that you'll have to deal with in the fight, you'll want to assign 5 players to deal with every single soak. It's just easier for healers to heal the same people over and over again. And then you also want to make sure you have groups set up for the execution sentences. And you want to make sure that these 5 people that you have assigned to soak Tyr's Wrath are in either the front or the right group. The other groups don't matter nearly as much. You'll also want at least 1 healer in each of the groups. That being said, let's get into the encounter here. So similar to Heroic, this fight kind of hinges around the boss's energy, and how you interact with that energy is kind of how you want to be dragging these bosses out. The mythic mechanic is that there is this ghost that goes around and kind of echoes the abilities of one of the bosses and also empowers the abilities of one of the bosses at a time. Now, fortunately, this fight is exactly the same every single time you deal with the encounter. So nothing really changes. As long as you get used to the timings of this fight, it'll do the same thing every single time and you can deal with it pretty easily. Now, a couple things to note in the video here. This is a pre-nerf video of the world first kill of this boss. So a few things have changed since this kill. Damage is down across the board. Things like the Avenger shields that you see on screen right now. In the world first kill, there were 8 of them that go out. Nowadays, there's only 4 of those. So whereas before you had to assign a whole bunch of backup dispels, such as warlocks, to use their imps to dispel debuffs that are left behind by the Avenger shields, now just your healers can deal with those dispels on their own. As long as you have some sort of new weak aura or something like Northern Sky raid tools to show private auras on your raid frames to dispel, should be able to deal with those pretty easily. That is an important thing to deal with. When that Avenger shield does go out, you want to make sure you dispel the dot off them, because that dot, in addition to the other damage in the encounter. First aura of the fight's going to be from General Bellamy. You'll see Scott here dragging her way off to the corner in order to place that aura of devotion. The main thing you'll notice about the mythic mechanic on this fight, you can see that ghost here in the very bottom of the screen here. Every single time one of the bosses does an aura, it'll echo one of the other boss's auras as well. So while you're dealing with General Bellamy's hammers, that divine toll, you'll also be dealing with War Chaplain Synth's Tyr's Wrath, which will put a healing absorb on the closest 5 people. So those assigned 5 people that you have, they need to make sure that they are close to this aura here. The closest 5 people to the aura, so they get those healing absorbs consistently, so healers have a consistent target to get that healing absorb off of. When it goes on multiple different people, it can be harder to deal with. The other main thing to look out for on this healing encounter, because it is a healing encounter, that's why you're running 5 healers, is this sacred toll. You'll see on the POVs that I have here, they have this big boom countdown going off. It's a lot of AoE damage. And kind of similar to dragons, the difficulty in this encounter is not the difficulty of the individual mechanics. It's kind of the stack up of multiple mechanics. So for instance, this overlap right here, big boom does about half of everyone's HP into the empowered Avenger's shield, which will hit every single player in the raid for a decent amount of damage, in addition to leaving a dot on them afterwards. These overlaps can kind of bleed your raid out. This is also one of the reasons Mistweavers are so powerful for this encounter. For the 20 Avenger shield overlap, you can have a revival assigned to instantly top up your raid and also dispel all of the dots from those Avenger shields as well. 2 Mistweavers, I wouldn't say is a requirement, but it's extremely helpful on this encounter. So now we get into the second aura overlap. This is the aura of Wrath from Commander Vinay Lightblood. This is overlapped with the shields from General Bellamy. So at the same time you're dealing with this execution sentence, you're also dealing with shields spawning from the boss. So you want to pay attention to the positioning of the execution sequence. You see they're kind of in this square pattern, or kind of a diamond from THG's POV here, but you'll notice that these 2 execution sentences in the front and the right are essentially the same distance away from the aura up here. This is important for the next overlap, which is the execution sentences plus the Tyr's Wrath. You want to make sure that the people that are assigned to soak the absorb from the Tyr's Wrath are able to get close enough to the circle that they're the ones that are getting the absorb and not somebody in the other circle. Let's move on though. This is definitely one of the hardest sequences in the fight to deal with right now. Soaking the execution sentences doesn't do a lot of damage on its own. But also, Avenger Shields go out right afterwards, which is a huge amount of damage on the raid, plus dispels need to happen. Plus you're also dodging hammers and shields at the same time. And also at the same time, War Chaplain Sin needs to be baited in a position where everyone can swap to that blinding light shield so she doesn't disorient the entire raid. On top of that, you also need to make sure War Chaplain Sin is in a good enough position to where after this Searing Radiance cast, one of your tanks can drag her to the corner for her aura that's going to happen right after this Searing Radiance. It's important as tanks, when you are dragging specifically War Chaplain Sin, you are outranging her. If you're in range of her, she will just stand there and cast Exorcism nonstop. So you can see whenever this Radiance cast goes off, the tank that's dragging her out, I believe it's Scott in the situation, he's already well out of the raid. So she doesn't sit there and cast, and she just instantly runs to the corner. So let the Aura of Peace go off far away from the raid, no one has any chance of getting silenced, and you're good to go. So this is that bad overlap that I'm talking about here. Avenger Shields, dots instantly need to be dispelled. Execution Sentence, you're already kind of spread out because you have those shields going out, but you need to quickly group back up together to get into the Execution Sentences. And at the same time, if you're one of those 5 people assigned to soak the Healing Absorb from the Tear's Wrath, you need to make sure you are on the close edge of these execution sentences up here. And if you're also, likewise, if you're in one of these 2 groups for these execution sentences and you're not assigned to soak the Tear's Wrath Absorbs, you need to be on the bottom side of these circles. That whole sequence, it's about 45 seconds long, but a lot happens in those 45 seconds. If you can get, that's probably the first wall of the fight. If you get through that fight, the next most dangerous thing doesn't happen until about 5 minutes in. It's really kind of just all about tank swaps here. Speaking of which, the Double Judgment, it does cause quite a bit of a problem for tanks on this fight. Making sure you have the right person with aggro on the next mob that needs to be taunted out is definitely one of the biggest difficulties of this fight as a tank. You should expect your tanks to probably have issues with that early on in this fight. If they don't, you've got some pretty awesome tanks, but give them some time to figure it out. It's a pretty annoying mechanic to deal with. So we're back to the beginning of the fight here with the Bellamy aura about to go off. You have a little bit of leeway when it gets to 100 energy. You can see they actually have a timer for the aura of devotion here. It doesn't instantly go off the second they get to 100 energy. So you have a little, again, you have a little bit of leeway, but you can see with that aura coming up in a couple seconds, Scott's out of there. He's trying to get it to the corner. Now, I believe they get it in a pretty bad spot here. This is kind of a good example of what you don't want to do. Scott jumped out a little bit late there. This was right after one of those judgment combos I was talking about. So the bosses do take reduced damage for a little bit of time, but Yips and Scott are able to quickly rectify the situation, get the bosses out of the aura so they don't take reduced damage for too long here. It's a little unfortunate. War Chaplain Sin just likes to sit there and cast your Searing Radiance for a little while, but at least you can get some damage on Commander Vinay Lightblood here. So like I said, we're back to the original auras in the fight, which is just dodging shields, plus healing absorbs on 5 players. Really just more of a healing intensive portion of the fight, but there's not a lot else going on right now. Another Mammoth here, break the shields, dodge shields from Bellamy still. Essentially, this is like one of the biggest personal responsibility fights they've put into the game. At any given point, you're just making sure you're dodging shields, dodging hammers, making sure you're spread for Avenger Shields from Prop Paladin here, making sure you have a good pre-spread for the big 20 bomb of the shields as well. And then, of course, a revival to instantly get those debuffs off of you. Another Aura of Wrath from Commander Lightblood here. Again, this is dodging shields, plus the execution sentences. Now, something I do need to point out about these execution sentences is they target healers. So you're gonna have 4 healers targeted by this execution sentence. And because you're running 5 healers, you're going to have one group that can sometimes get 2 execution sentences if you're unlucky. So, of course, with Boomy dead, they know exactly which 4 healers they're gonna go on, but if they did have 5 healers alive, and let's say you got your execution sentence here, but you had 2 execution sentences in the front group, that group that has 2 healers in it needs to figure out in advance, okay, if both of us get execution sentence here, which one of us is going to move? Which one's going to plant? Which one's going to move? Figure that out in advance, so in the middle of the fight, you're not chaos calming. You move, I move. Just get it out of the way ahead of time. And then also, your other healers should be calming which one's open, so the 2 healers know which one to move to. Just something else that you can, save a couple of wipes on by having figured out in advance. Again, big personal responsibility here. Make sure you're spread for shields, but also dodge hammers and shields the entire time. THG is a warlock, he can dispel that shield debuff off himself instantly. Another shield from the Mammoth here from War Chaplain Sin. Have everyone swap to that shield, break it. And then we'll get one last set of auras here. And this is going to be the second most difficult portion of the fight, I'd say. This 5-minute overlap is the next spot that I would look to assign pretty much all remaining personals, health stones, health pots here. So it starts with an Avenger's Shield that just hits 8 people. Again, that's a lot of dots. It'll only be 4 for you. It's 8 for Liquid. Into this execution sentence. And then you also have the auras going off at the same time. Another Sacred Toll, big boom, doing a ton of damage to the entire raid. Ends up killing off one of our hunters. But again, if you can get past this section of the fight and have the bosses relatively low, it should be a pretty easy kill at this point. You will get one final aura at the end of the fight here. It'll be a third aura from General Bellamy, same as the beginning of the fight. It'll be dodging shields plus heal absorbs on 5 people. But if you look at the HP of the bosses, the strategy at this point is you want to, once this Aura of Devotion goes off, you want to make sure you get no more auras for the rest of the fight. So the goal here is to kill Commander Lightblood before he reaches 100 energy. Then after that, you want to kill War Chaplain Sin before they reach 100 energy, and then you want to kill Bellamy before they reach 100 energy. The HP difference here for Liquid isn't exactly where I'd like to see it. I'd like to see Bellamy and Sin low, but you also have to remember that in this kill VOD at the time, they were only 265 item level, whereas at the time of this video being posted, I think a real Mythic Progress guild could be closer to 280. So you can spend a lot more time focusing DPS on Bellamy and Sen and have them a lot closer together. Part of the reason you don't want to kill Lightblood too early is because there still is that retribution mechanic on this fight on Mythic where every 2 seconds after you kill one of the paladins, the damage of every other paladin left alive is increased by 5%. That stacks up very, very quickly. When you kill one of the paladins off and the other ones are still at 15 and 20% respectively, you're probably going to be in combat with them for about a minute more in the fight, which essentially turns every Avenger Shield into a one-shot, which that's pretty much 4 players dying every time it happens. So even DPS is really important. One final 20 shield mechanic, again, dispelled quickly by a revival, and we've killed off Commander Lightblood. We'll start stacking up that retribution mechanic on the boss. Now again, the goal here is to kill off War Chaplain Sin before they reach 100 energy, and we're on good pace to do that. At this point in the fight with retribution stacking, these Avenger Shields are starting to hurt, so you'll definitely want to use anything remaining, any raid cooldowns, any personals on every set of Avenger Shields just to try to live through them. I would expect to start losing people around this set of Avenger Shields here if people don't have personals ready. As you can see, everyone taking 70-80% of their HP bar from those Avenger Shields. But as long as you can kill off War Chaplain Sin before the aura here, you should be on good pace to kill the boss. And then finally, quickly dealing with the remaining HP of Bellamy. You can see the raid starts to bleed out pretty heavily here at the end with every single one of these Avenger Shields just doing a ton of damage. But of course, with 15 extra item levels on your raid, you should have no issue dealing with this boss. Thanks for watching. Again, any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below and I'll do my best to get to them.